as we head back to Washington this week, my message to President Trump and the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is pretty simple. Open the government, end the shutdown, and stop hurting the American people. In recent days, we've heard a great deal about the pain the shutdown has caused to the 800,000 federal workers who aren't getting paid, and actually it's more than that. It's their families as well. It's federal contractors who have employees who are also not getting paid. So it's several million Americans who are being affected by the shutdown. But indeed, many of them have, as I've traveled the state and visited with them, and many of them with tears in their eyes have told me they've had to turn to food pantries like Smile to feed their children. Yet the longer this government shutdown goes on, the more Americans that will feel the pain. And unfortunately, whenever there's economic turmoil, it's also the most vulnerable who get hit the hardest. Here in Passaic County, 50,000 people struggle with food insecurity, which means they don't often know where their next meal is coming from. They may have jobs, but they still struggle to pay for 3 meals a day. They may face financial challenges like paying off a medical bill or caring for an ailing parent. In these situations, the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, as it's been called, SNAP, is a lifeline. But because of the Trump shutdown, federal funding for local food banks, school lunches, and SNAP is running dry. Let me be clear. Families who participate in SNAP are far from living large. 5 out of 10 live below half of the poverty line. 5 out of 10 live below half of the poverty line. That's about $10,400 for a family of 3, according to the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities. Nearly 70% of SNAP beneficiaries are families with children, and nearly a third are households that include seniors or people with disabilities. Across New Jersey, more than 700,000 participate in the SNAP program each month. Benefits for February were distributed last week, which means families on SNAP need to budget accordingly based upon what is the risk of a continuing government shutdown. It has to last through February, and may be no money left for March so long as the president insists on this shutdown. And organizations like Smile are rightfully worried that they won't be able to meet the demand. What's most shameful is that these hardships are not the result of an actual economic crisis, but instead of a manufactured crisis created by the President of the United States. President Trump continues to hold federal employees hostage in the hopes of extracting $5.7 billion from Congress for a border wall he promised Mexico would pay for. I don't think a campaign that would have said, I'm going to build a 25, and that's the other thing, we've lost sight that while he is now seeking $5.7 billion, this wall in its totality, as he's always sought, is over $25 billion. And in a campaign, he didn't say, I'm going to build a wall and U.S. citizens are going to pay for it. I don't think he would have gotten too far in that campaign. He said Mexico was going to pay for it. So neither are they paying for it, nor is this the only amount of money that he will want. Keep in mind, last December, the Senate passed bipartisan legislation, unanimous, to fund the government, and we included more than $1 billion in additional border security funding as requested by the president's own budget. What the president sent us in his budget is what we passed. Vice President Pence said, if you pass this, the president will sign it. That's exactly what happened. We passed it unanimously on December 18th, I believe. And then when conservative commentators, who the American people did not elect, bullied the president on TV, he cowered and ultimately said, no, I need $5 billion. And that's gone up to $5.7 billion. And even in the alleged offer that he made the other day, if you add up all the other categories in addition to the $5.7 billion, we're nearly at $8 billion more that he's seeking in border security. This is constantly a moving target. Democrats believe in smart border security solutions, scanners to catch drug smugglers trying to sneak through our ports or to detect human trafficking, technology to detect unauthorized border crossings and hidden tunnels, better infrastructure and more personnel at our ports of entry. So again, we voted for that type of funding, only to have President Trump demand at the very last minute another $5.7 billion for a wall that he promised Mexico would pay for. I think we have much better things to spend $5.7 billion on in terms of making sure that we build 2 new trans-Hudson tunnels under the Hudson River that would create enormous jobs and economic opportunity, or to help fund education in this nation, or to deal with food security in our country. And the list is rather long of how much more valuable that type of money spent in that way would be. Time and again, we've learned that the president is incapable of caring about anyone other than himself. It's not in his DNA. Donald Trump has never had to lay in bed awake at night wondering how he's going to make this month's rent, or whether Don Jr.'s next meal, where is that going to come from? He doesn't understand what it's like for a family that's falling on tough times and must rely on the generosity of total strangers to survive. What kind of American president is willing to let the neediest families in our country go hungry just to fulfill a ludicrous campaign promise? Who does that? Who does that? Every single day of this shutdown has been a disgrace, and there's no good reason for it. If President Trump wants to have a real discussion about how we have border security and anything else, then he should release the hostages and reopen the government. If it comes to a point that the president can use federal employees and the shutdown of government to ultimately get what he wants, then this will happen time and time and time again. It will happen time and time and time again. Instead of opening up the government, he's throwing out insulting proposals. And he's fixated on his dream of building a national monument to himself that won't actually solve our challenges at the southern border. It's time for the Senate Majority Leader to let us vote to fund the government. I believe if the Senate Majority Leader put the bills that have been passed by the House of Representatives to fully fund the government, and he gave us a vote on the Senate floor, that would pass. And then the burden would be on the president to say that, in fact, he doesn't want to keep the government open. Those votes are there. I'm convinced of it. They were there on December 18th. But the majority leader will not put those votes on the floor. President Trump may not have a heart, but I'd like to think our Republican colleagues do. They have to choose whether they're going to stand up for the most vulnerable or stand with the bully in the White House who's content to see them suffer. I hope they make the right choice this week as we go back to the Senate.